Hello and welcome to TVP Stories, the Facebook Live series that gives you an insight into Thames Valley Police. And tonight we're talking about cold cases. I'm delighted to be joined by the head of the cold case team, Beirne. He'll be taking your questions during the event. So if you have a question, put it in the comments section. We'll get to as many as we can. Thank you to those who have already put their questions forward. We're going to start tonight by talking about a brutal murder that happened 25 years ago today. Pete, can you tell us a little bit about the murder and also what we're appealing for tonight?
Certainly. As you say, 25 years ago today, John Sheppard was murdered in a bookmaker's or betting shop in Cambridge Street, Aylesbury. On a Saturday afternoon. John was the manager of that shop and had been there for 27 years. The shop closed around about 5 o'clock, as most betting shops closed that sort of time 25 years ago. Other members of staff left. John was in the shop by himself. He was due to have a series of phone calls from other betting shops within the series of shops that were owned by the same person, a man called John Horwood. We know that some of those shops rang and spoke to John, and the last call that was answered was around about 5:15. Thereafter, no calls were answered. John was due to pick up a friend after work. He didn't arrive. That friend was concerned when he didn't arrive, so they went round to the shop. On arrival, they saw that the lights were still on, the monitors were on, still within the shop. John's car was around the back, and they became very, very concerned because John did have a known heart problem. So they rang the police, but before the police arrived, an off-duty officer was attending the Chinese takeaway, which was next door. He became aware of what was going on, and he decided to break into the shop. He broke into the shop and found John slumped over the toilet.
And it was a brutal attack, wasn't it?
Incredibly brutal. Poor John being subject to a horrific attack. Stabbed multiple times, in the region of 40 times, about his body, and also had very serious injuries to the head.
So what are we appealing for tonight? How can the public help?
What we're appealing for is information. On the initial investigation, it was the subject of a full forensic examination. Blood was found within the private section of that shop, which we believe was left by one of the offenders. That blood has since been developed into a full DNA profile, but unfortunately there's no matches against the National DNA database, so we don't know the source of that DNA at the moment. So what we're hoping for is, as a result of this appeal, members of the public may know something, because obviously it's something to have on your conscience all that time, that someone may have confided in a person who, for whatever reason, couldn't make contact with us either during the investigation initially or when we did the previous appeal 5 years ago. So I'd ask them to please make contact with us with any suspicions that they have. It's very easy for us now, we've got a full DNA profile, to check to see whether that person's known to us, and if they're not known to us, go and see them and obtain a mouth swab. And even if that person has subsequently died, it's still possible for us to either eliminate or implicate them by going to see a blood relative and asking them for a mouth swab.
So you're after names of people who...
Yeah, names of people, of anyone that's got suspicions of people, yes please.
And you can contact us. We're going to put some graphics up about how you can contact Thames Valley Police. And there's also a reward as well from Crime Stoppers and TVP, isn't there?
That's correct. A total of £20,000, £10,000 from the Thames Valley Police, £10,000 from Crime Stoppers, for information that leads to the arrest and conviction.
So if you have any information, get in touch. As I say, the contact details will be on the screen. We're going to go to your live questions now. Steve and Guy have asked, why do we have a cold case team? Why are we not concentrating on crimes that are happening now? Okay.
A good question. Well, ultimately, our cold case team, or the Major Crime Review team as we called, were formed to look at the most serious offences which have remained undetected. When, as I do, you visit relatives of people that have been murdered, you realise the massive impact that event's had on their lives. I mean, it is completely life-changing. And it's important for families to know that their loved one isn't forgotten, and that the police will do all that we can to try and bring the offenders to justice. And also it's important that would-be offenders know that we, the police, aren't going to forget these offences, so that if something happens today and they get away with it, or I think they got away with it, there's the potential for us to come knocking on their door in years to come.
And also your team do work on current cases as well, don't they?
Yes, we do. We're a very small team. There's myself and 5, but on occasions when live or new murder cases come in, they work on those cases as well.
Thanks to Pauline, she asked about the John Sheppard case in the comments, so hopefully she now has some information about what we're doing in the appeal. Margaret asks, I thought there was new evidence in the murder of Janet Brown. Could you talk about that case and where we're at with that investigation?
Yes, there is new evidence in that. Well, as of 4 years ago, it's very similar to John's case, as much that on Janet's case we have a full DNA profile. Janet was a lady who lived up in a place called Radnage, which is up in the Chiltern Hills above Stoken Church, near to High Wycombe. Again, she was the subject of a brutal murder. That remains undetected, and very similar to John's case, we have a full profile but no matches on the database. And again, we're hopeful that we'll get information in relation to that, but we are, as we speak, in the process of locating people and swabbing people.
So for the Janet Brown case, you'd need names as well from the public?
Yes, indeed.
And to contact us in the same way?
Yeah, I mean, there are in fact 4 cases that our team worked on where we've got full DNA profiles but no matches on the database.
Tara, thanks for your question. She asks, how many cold cases do TVP have?
Okay, well, in terms of murders, and it's not just murders that we deal with, but in terms of murders, we have 50, but they go back as far back as 1958. So a number of those, whilst they're classed as homicides, wouldn't necessarily be murders in how the public would understand murders. A number of those would be deaths that have occurred as a result of accidents, whereby at the coroner's court they've said he was unlawfully killed.
Mohammed asks, why do you feel it's important to continue investigating cases that are so old?
Well, as I said earlier on, it's important that first of all for the families to make sure that they're aware that their case hasn't been forgotten. It's important to reassure the public that we will continue to reinvestigate these cases, but also it's a question of putting the fear onto offenders to make sure that they potentially can't sleep safe in their beds at night because there potentially may be a knock on their door some years later.
Louisa asks, with developing technology, how often do you retest evidence in cold cases?
Okay, well, we're obviously mindful always of what advancements there have been in forensic science. The majority of cases we're aware of what the issues are, what evidence potentially we have. There have been cases where we've held off doing additional forensic work knowing that there's been advancements in the pipeline. So once a case has been reviewed, or once a new case has stopped being worked on, ordinarily it'd be every 2 years that we'd relook at that case.
She also asked, does there have to be a reason to retest items?
The reason would be that there's the potential for additional evidence.
Right.
That would be the reason.
We're going to go back to the John Sheppard case now. His daughter has actually emigrated to Australia, and she made this appeal from Australia for people to come forward with information. So please watch this.
My dad was a bookie for forever. That was his passion. He loved doing that. He was amazing. Deadpan, dry wit. He was known as Gentle John in the community. So I think that sort of said a lot for what lots of people thought about him and as they knew him. He was an amazing dad. He was an amazing husband. He was always there for us. I'd already migrated to Australia at that time of his death. So I hadn't actually seen my father for about 18 months, or my mum. They were due to come out. That was 94, obviously, when my dad was taken from us. And 95, they were due to come out. There's still the why. We need clarity around that. We do need closure. We just want somebody to come forward. That's all. It still really hurts. Yeah, you think that you'll get over it, but you actually really don't. Somebody knows something. There would have been somebody, well, covered in lots of blood. Somebody would have, yeah, they would have shared that. I don't believe that this person can be walking around and sleeping well at night, knowing that they've done what they've done. And there's also somebody that knows that person. I just think somebody needs to have the courage to come forward, to be able to put this person to justice for the horrific attack that they actually did to my father. It's inhumane. It's something that needs to be closed. I just feel I think I would be grateful if somebody would take ownership of this. It'd be just a great thing, a good thing for both of us. This is what we want more than anything. We all want that. The family and friends want that. Even I think my children do it.
Pete, can you just reiterate to people how they can get in touch and how they can give us names of potential suspects in this case?
Sure, okay. They can get in touch by ringing 101 and quoting the unique reference number, which is number 2 of today's date, the 3rd of December 2019. They can go on the Thames Valley Police website if they wish, or they can go via Crime Stoppers, and that number is 0800 555 111.
And the details are on the screen now. And just to reiterate, there is a £20,000 reward. We're going to go to your questions now. Christine asks, was there any CCTV or DNA in the John Sheppard case?
Well, obviously we've got DNA now, and that's the main reason for this appeal today. CCTV, there was some, not a vast amount, unfortunately. Bearing in mind, 25 years ago, CCTV wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So there was some, it didn't really help us a great deal, unfortunately.
Jackie asked also about the John Sheppard murder. Do you think John Sheppard murder was a burglary that had gone wrong?
Probably. I mean, it was a robbery as opposed to a burglary, in as much that the day's takings were stolen, in the region of about £1,000 or thereabouts. But John also had quite a large amount of money on his person anyway, about £600. So, whilst we can't be certain, it's probable that it was a robbery, and that John put up a bit of a struggle. I mean, but you have to realise that John was 66. You know, he was not in the best of health, and for him to be attacked by someone with a knife and a hammer, with a view just to stealing £1,000, you just can't really comprehend why that happened.
Emma asks, can people give information anonymously?
They can through Crime Stoppers, yeah.
And will people have to go to court, or are you just after a name and then we'll investigate that name?
It depends on what the evidence is they have, but initially, if they just give us the name, that name can be checked out.
Moving on to some other cases that people are asking about. Kat asks, the case of schoolgirl Stacey Curapel.
Yeah.
Was that ever resolved?
No, that's unresolved. That's one of the cases that we have. We've done some work on it. We will be doing other work on it as well.
Another case Jean asks about is the murder of Dr. Davidson in Amersham in 1966. Is that still an unresolved case?
That is unresolved, yes. Dr. Davidson was walking in a place called Hodgemore Woods, just between Amersham and Beaconsfield, with a dog, and was found the next day. There is some evidence, but I can't go into the full ins and outs of it on any of our unresolved cases, because it'd be wrong to, because also I want to continue to have would-be offenders fearful of what we do have.
And you'd ask anyone with information about those or other cases to contact us?
Any case, not necessarily, but obviously I'm interested in Thames Valley cases, but if you've got information about any cases nationwide, get in touch with us and I'll pass it through to the relevant force. Tracy
asks, in relation to the John Sheppard murder, do we know much about the offender from the DNA that was left at the scene?
No, other than it's male.
Right.
If if you look online, there are things that can be done now in terms of ethnicity, eye colour, things like that. But that's not used within the UK at the moment. It's got to be tested, and then it's got to be approved as being ethical. So we can't use that at the moment.
And I'm not sure if you said the DNA is up from blood or
Yes.
yeah, from blood at the scene.
Yeah.
Lucy asks, are there any cold cases from this year?
From this year? No. There's a case from the beginning of last year. The case of the young lad in Oxford that was stabbed.
Friars of War.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that there is that one. That technically is not a cold case at the moment because that is still being worked on. But as things stand, that has the potential to become a cold case.
Josh asks, what's the oldest cold case that TVP has at the moment?
The oldest case that we have in terms of homicides would be the 1958 murder of a lady called Joyce Green in Denham, which is in the south of the Force. Again, she was a lady that was at home, was murdered in her home.
Sam asks, what's a typical day in the cold case office for you and your workers?
Okay, well, it's nothing like it is on the TV.
He says, is it like new tricks?
No, unfortunately. No. I mean, they solve it within an hour. The last case we were in court with earlier on this year, we've been working on that for 7 years. But we don't work on one case solely, so we work on a number of cases at the same time. But a typical day is a lot of reading, a lot of researching. A large part of what the team does is going out, locating people and taking mouth swaps from them for these cases where we've got DNA. And
can you tell us a little bit about your team, what you do?
Okay, well, my team consists of myself and 5 others. 4 of them are police officers. One of them is a member of police staff. He's a retired officer, similar to myself. What we do is they can get called on to deal with live cases, but in the main, the majority of their time is spent working on historic murders and rapes. And
can you tell us some of the successes your team have had over the years?
Sure. In the last 4 years, in the last 10 years, we've detected 4 murders. So we've had the case of Claire Waterton, who was murdered in 1981. Claire was a 17-year-old girl that was last seen in Hamwell in West London. She was found the next day on a towpath in Windsor. That case managed to get a result for that in 2013, so 30 plus years after the event, where a man called Colin Campbell was arrested as a result of DNA that was found on her body.
Right.
And then another case was, again, involved a 17-year-old. This was a girl called Yolande Waddington. She lived at a place called Beirne, which is just outside Newbury. She'd been working as a nanny, gone out one evening around about 10 o'clock to post a letter, didn't return to the place where she was nannying. Her body was found. An investigation took place at the time. Unfortunately, didn't get a result. But then, over 40 years later, we managed to get a result. That was from 1966.
And also you've had results in what people know as double jeopardy cases as well.
Yes, we have, yeah. We had a case in 2010, was the result involved the murder of Vickie Thompson. She was murdered in 1995 in Ascot under Wychwood, which is up in the northwest part of the Force. She went walking her dog one Saturday afternoon, didn't return, and then was found on a railway embankment with severe head injuries, which unfortunately she died from later. A man called Mark Wester was originally arrested and charged, but was acquitted at trial. We then used the new double jeopardy legislation, which came into being in 2005. But again, it took us best part of 5 years to get sufficient evidence and to go through the process, which you have to, in order to get what's called new and compelling evidence, which is really strong evidence to apply to the Court of Appeal to ask for a retrial, which happened, and he was convicted. And then just this year we had a result with the murder of a man called David Walkins, who was murdered in 1993 in Reading. Again, a man called Andrew Everson was arrested and charged back in 1993, stood trial but was acquitted. We managed to get new and compelling evidence against him which again led to his rearrest, charge and conviction.
And we're going to go to some more of the live questions from people viewing. Christine sent this message earlier. How do you decide which cases to work on, and how much time do you usually allow these cases?
Okay, well, when we first started, we did a matrix of all the cases we had. So we looked at what the case was, were there any strong suspects, what state the exhibits were in, what state the file was in, because bear in mind we're talking pre-computers in the main, so invariably it was all paper-based, whether the statement still existed. So we scored all those and then decided to work on those that scored the highest. However, we then got different calls on our time, in as much that the Home Office said that they would fund certain forensic tests for certain cases over in different time periods. So it made sense to utilise that funding to work on those cases.
So a lot of the work that you do and your team do is reliant on forensics, retesting.
Yes, in the main, it's certainly in all the convictions we've had, it's been new forensic evidence that we've obtained.
Nikki and Lisa asked the same question. What is the time frame for a case to be classed as a cold case, and when do you decide to relook at individual cases?
Okay, so a case becomes a cold case when the original senior investigating officer decides that there's no active lines of inquiry that can be pursued, and that can vary. So it can be after 6 months, or it can be 18 months, 2 years. At that point, once he or she's decided that there's no further active lines of inquiry, they will make sure the file is in a fit state to be put away. They'll then prepare a current situation report so that whoever reads that in the future knows exactly what the issues were, what the strength of the evidence was, who the suspects were, that sort of thing. We would have done a review ourselves because it's undetected. We have to do reviews after 28 days if a case is undetected, a new case. And then once it's actually put away, when it's put away now, we make sure all the exhibits are correct, etc. We've fortunately in the force now we've got a state-of-the-art archive where things can go. And then at that point, it would then be looked at every 2 years. So we'd look at
every case, is it?
Every homicide.
Right.
Yeah. So every unresolved homicide would be looked at every 2 years.
Sue asked, when you review a case, how do you notify family members?
That varies on a case-by-case basis. On a number of cases, we haven't notified the family until we've got the new evidence, which would enable us to arrest a suspect. On other cases, families made contact with us and said, please can you review our case, so they're aware of what we're doing. What we try and do is, on occasions we work without the public knowing what we're doing, but on occasions where we've done that work, got a full DNA profile, similar to John's case and Janet's case, but there are no hits, then we have to come to the public and ask for their assistance in trying to solve it.
So quite often the families won't have spoken to police for decades,
That's
possibly,
correct.
and then you knock on the door or ring them.
That's correct, yeah.
Question here from Vivian. What case has meant the most to you that you've solved?
Right, well they all mean a lot because I go and visit the families and I see the impact that the case has had on them. So all cases where we're able to get a result for the family are fantastic. If I had to pick one, it would have to be the Claire Waterton case, and that's only because that was the first ever murder I worked on as a young detective back in 1981, and I was very, very fortunate then to be on the Major Crime Review team when we re-looked at the case, managed to get the hit against Colin Campbell, and get the conviction for the family. Lucy
and Emma asked the same question. What's the oldest case that has been solved by your team?
That would be the murder of Yolande Waddington, which was 1966.
Tara asks, what has been the force's success rate in solving cold cases?
Okay, like I say, it's not like new tricks, and it doesn't seem a lot. Four murders detected in 10 years, I think is quite good. But you have to bear in mind that these murders had full investigations at the time, and obviously if they were solvable, then they would have been. And yeah, I mean, but it's, you have to say that although it's only say 4 murders in 10 years, that's not solely what we've been doing. We've also been working on stranger rapes, doing live reviews of cases, and things like that.
And you've solved some sexual offences as well, haven't you? So,
yeah, we've solved in the region of well, we have 15
right.
stranger rapes.
A question here from Christine: is it possible to go back to the time of an incident and find out what mobile phone activity there was in a specific area, or are you reliant on the evidence that's in the file?
It's what's in the file, really, because certainly mobile phone companies are only obligated to keep data for a certain length of time.
Right.
So if it's not applied for during the original investigation, you won't get it. But obviously, a lot of the cases that we're working on from the 60s, 70s and 80s, mobile phones weren't in existence.
Bill asks, who decides which cases to revisit and work on with the media as well?
Ultimately, that's my decision. In terms of asking for the public's help, that depends on what the evidence is. We do look to use milestone anniversaries. I'd like to, obviously today's the 25th anniversary of John's murder. So we look to do that just so that it focuses the public's mind, and also then brings it to the fore as to what evidence we have.
Lewis asks, is there a point when a cold case is closed, even without a result?
None of our homicides will ever be completely closed. They'll always be open. Yes, there won't necessarily be any forensic work that can be done now, but we don't necessarily know what can be done in the future. So no cases will be closed. However, obviously in the future, so like the 1958 case, sometime in the future, you have to think, well, is the offender still alive? And if they're not alive, then you have to say, is it justified in spending money trying to find out who did it?
Pauline asks, is there any new information on the house fire in the early 90s in Oxford that affected a Somalian family? Are you aware of that case?
I'm aware of the case. There's no new information in relation to that, no, I'm afraid.
We're now going to play you a video in another cold case. This is the case and murder of 7-year-old Emily Salvini. She died in Reading in 1997. And this was an appeal we put out a couple of years ago. Please watch, and if you have any information, get in touch.
I just want this person to pay for what he's done. I'm sorry, it's not normal for a parent to see the child going before than a parent itself. It doesn't work like that, it's the other way around.
She was a real girly girl, and one of the funniest things, well, the sweetest things, was she always had very girly girl playtimes with her girlfriends, and it was always Barbie, because Barbie was big at that time. Yeah, can you remember? And you always got given the horse. And he would just open the door a bit and give you a horse. She was kind, really kind. When the children wrote about her afterwards, they always said if ever they were left on their own in the playground, it would always be Emily that would come over and play with them.
I don't have any memories of Emily. It's probably the hardest thing for me. The only memory I have is of the fire. Everyone grieved, everyone had that pain. I never had that pain because I never knew my sister. To me, I have no memory of my sister. The only memory I have is from the point she died, and that could be very hard for me, and I don't often like thinking about it.
It's the panic when you allow yourself to think too deeply about them not being here, even now, 20 years on. It never gets any easier. Time hasn't healed that. And it's almost like I just stamp my feet and I just want her back, I want her back, I want her back. So you just get up every day, and then they add up, and now it's 20 years.
It's important for me and my family, not for closure, but for Emily. I would urge them to come forward. However big or small they think their knowledge is, anything can help. You don't know how it could affect a case. Coming forward could possibly be that breakthrough.
It's like closing a book, then just talk about the best things in the book. As simple as that.
Pete, are you hopeful that someone out there knows something about Emily's murder?
I would hope so. As I said before, what happened, must have played on that person's mind. The hope is that they confided in somebody, and that person can now come forward and say, you see from the video there, it's absolutely devastating. Poor young girl, 7 years old, asleep in bed, to be murdered like that. It's awful.
And as we said earlier, if anyone's got any information about the John Sheppard murder or any of the other murders we've discussed, please get in touch, and you can do that via the police or Crime Stoppers. And in John's case, there is, as we said previously, a reward of £20,000. So in the last section, we're going to just go through the live questions from everyone. Mark asks, how can I become a detective on your cold case team?
Okay, well, my team is made up of DCs, detective constables, other than the one person that's a member of police staff who was a detective constable. They're all very, very experienced. The way to do it would be to apply and join the Thames Valley Police, become a detective, either as an officer or as a member of police staff. Get as much experience as you can, and then apply for a vacancy as and when one comes up.
And there's a detective course, isn't there, that you have to do?
Oh yes, yeah, yes. I mean, if I'm honest, it would be very unusual for anybody to join now and become a member of my team within 5 or 10 years. I would say.
You need the experience of
Yes,
major crime cases. Yeah. It's actually a comment here from someone called Tom Cameron. Seems to know you, saying, well done in your cold case investigations, good luck, and well done that you've had all the success over the years.
That's right. Thanks, Tom. Yeah.
A question from Chris here. With the advancements in profiling, offender profiling, is that something that the cold case team uses?
In profiling, you're talking about DNA profiling, which obviously we use all the time, or if you're talking about offender profiling, it's something we don't necessarily use too much. The National Crime Agency do have profilers, behavioural and geographic profilers, which are used on occasions. Geographic profiling is more to do when we have a series of offences, and they give you indications to where the offender's most likely to have lived or come from.
Right. Would the NCA get involved in cold cases as well? Or?
Yes, yeah, we were in touch with them, yeah, because quite often we'll, like on John's case, on Janet's case, when there's not a match on the National DNA database, we'll apply for lists from the National DNA database of people who've got similar DNA. Right. So they're not the offender, because it's not a complete match, but where there's but we apply it and get lists of people who've got similar DNA, and then we look at those, and the NCA come and help us prioritise those lists to see whether or not it could be a close relative of those people.
And you also work with forces or request DNA testing and searches abroad as well, don't you? In some of the
Yes, we do.
cases?
Yeah. On a regular basis, we apply via Interpol for our DNA profiles to be checked against international databases.
A question here from Stuart. Would it help if DNA was taken from every person who dies?
It would help me and my team, but with all these things, there's a balance there, isn't there? In terms of whilst it helps us, does it impact upon the rights of the family?
So it's a moral question.
Exactly.
Helen asks, what if I have information but I'm nervous at the consequences of coming forward?
Please come forward. I mean, if you don't want to give us your name, call us via Crime Stoppers.
You don't have to give your full name, and as Pete said, you can contact Crime Stoppers, give the number, or on their website as well. Dave asks, what support do you give to the families of victims in cold cases?
Okay, it depends upon what stage that initial contact's made. But if we're successful, then we're with that family all the way through to trial. So my team is very, very small, but we do, and unlike other police forces, we keep our case from the reinvestigation all the way through to trial. So either I myself or one of my team will be in contact with the family, making sure that they're aware of what's going on and any updates. But if the case is one that's being worked on, then we'll agree with them as to how often we'll make contact. So it's normally every 6 months or so. But if they want to contact me any time, they can and ask questions. But normally it's every 6 months or so we'll give them an update.
Gavin asks, have you ever had to extradite someone for a cold case?
Yes.
From another country?
Yeah.
You have. Well, that's all the questions we've got for you tonight, Pete.
Okay.
So thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for their questions. Just to reiterate, if you have any information about the John Sheppard murder or any of the other murders, please contact TVP or Crime Stoppers on the numbers we've given. Thank you to everyone, and join us in the new year for the next event.